One of my favorite principles of the ASEA ethos is an African philosophy referred to as Ubuntu. And I first heard of this philosophy by way of an email that I received from my mother that was sharing a story that I think had been circulated pretty widely across the internet. The story tells of an anthropologist who was studying a culture in southern Africa. And as kind of a test of sorts, he took a basket of fruit and set it a ways away from a group of children and lined these children up looking at the fruit from a distance and told them that when he blew the whistle, they could run as quickly as they could to the fruit, and those that got there first could in fact eat as much as they could carry. And he lined the children up and ensured that they understood, and then stepped back and blew the whistle. And unexpectedly, what he saw, as outlined in this story, is the children didn't run as you might think would be natural for them to do. They actually reached out and grabbed one another's hands and slowly walked in a straight line to the basket of fruit. Then they got around the basket, they sat in a circle, and they took one piece of fruit out and took a bite, and each child around the circle took a bite. And they continued to do that until all of them were filled. And as the story read, the anthropologist was very surprised by this act, wondered if maybe they didn't understand that if they had run ahead of the group, they actually could have had more. And he asked one of the children, how is it possible that you all knew to do this and actually behaved this way? And one of the children said, how can we be happy if one of us is sad? And then he said the word Ubuntu. After reading that story, again, I'm constantly thinking about the ASEA ethos and where core principles that we can teach can make a difference in helping us to build a unique culture and ethos here. And I started to research this notion of Ubuntu. And I learned that the African word Ubuntu and the philosophy actually stretches across several different countries and actual cultures there. But it's most effectively translated into English in a very simple phrase that says, I am because we are. And I found myself pondering that. That's a very powerful phrase. Ubuntu means I am because we are. It doesn't mean that I am because I am, which might have been the notion or the philosophy that would have compelled a young child to run faster ahead of everyone else, focused on the I am. But it actually signals that as people, we recognize that not one of us is independent of another, that we depend on each other, and we're committed to one another. And that's the power of this notion of I am because we are, or Ubuntu. I actually spent a fair amount of time researching this, and I found some beautiful quotes by African leaders and philosophers that understood this. One of my favorites is from Reverend Desmond Tutu. Speaking on Ubuntu, he said, Ubuntu speaks of the very essence of being human. We say, hey, so-and-so has Ubuntu. Well, then you are generous, you are hospitable, you are friendly and caring and compassionate. You share what you have. It's to say, my humanity is caught up and is inextricably bound up in yours. We belong in a bundle of life. We say a person is a person through other persons, which is another definition of Ubuntu. Desmond Tutu goes on to say the following, that a person with Ubuntu is open and available to others, affirming of others, and does not feel threatened that others are able and good, for he or she has a proper self-assurance that comes from knowing that he or she belongs in a greater whole, and is only diminished when others are humiliated, or when others are diminished, when others are tortured or oppressed or treated as if they were less than who they are. These are beautiful and rich statements about a wonderful philosophy that prevails across many different cultures. I began to ask myself, this is ASEA. No person at ASEA gets recognized in the absence of the help of others. No person advances in rank without others. In a very real way, at ASEA, any one of you could say, I am only because we are. I'm here because others told me about ASEA. I'm here at Bronze Base Camp because my team members told others about ASEA. I love the notion of thinking that we don't exist as islands independent one from another. We're all interconnected. Our choices, which we sometimes might argue are independent of anyone else, actually have an effect on the whole. And this to me is a beautiful principle, even a truth that should prevail here at ASEA. We should all maintain the attitude of humility, that I am not because I am, but I am because we are. If we maintain that philosophical disposition here at the home office, we'll make decisions with you in mind. We'll recognize that we aren't an island to ourselves, but we have a responsibility to you. It's similarly in the field, if you take that attitude upon yourself, you'll ask yourself at any given moment if what you're doing can affect the whole positively or in some cases negatively. And use that filter of Ubuntu to remind you that I am because we are. That self-same year that I read this story, I shared this philosophical message at convention. And what emerged from that is this notion that I am ASEA. We are ASEA. All of us are part of this great movement at ASEA. And I want to challenge you to remember that if the heart and lungs got into a battle with one another, who would suggest or win that they're more important than the other? I think we all know that they both depend entirely upon each other for an organism or, frankly, an organization to survive. You in the field are the heart of this company, and we may represent the lungs, but we're both absolutely vital organs in this organization. And if we can maintain this beautiful philosophy of Ubuntu as a core principle of the ASEA ethos, I think we'll all understand that none of us exist in the absence of the others, that I am because we are and you are too. So in summary, remember where Ubuntu fits in the ASEA ethos. I am because we are. No one exists in isolation. We're all interconnected. What we do affects the whole, and not just the whole of ASEA, but the whole world. And none of us reaches any heights without the support and help of others. Let's remember Ubuntu.